We have for too long focused on the global challenge without looking at the challenge within. What climate change is going to do to our populations, how it will ravage our poor and vulnerable that need the support the most. I'm Satya Tripathi. I'm the Secretary General of the Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet. It's a global catalyst of 300 plus organizations from all over the world focused on sustainability, climate action, environmental conservation, and ecosystem preservation. What we primarily do is we bring together stakeholders from a very diverse set of ideas and possibilities, and we make the impossible possible. I would like to really highlight SDG Goal 17 should have been Goal 1 from day one, building partnerships, because all the other SDGs are impossible to achieve without building virtuous partnerships of stakeholders. When you look at the whole ecosystem, there are great ideas, but there's no money. And there's a lot of money because the global GDP is more than $100 trillion. So anybody that tells you there's not enough money to do the right things is living in a parallel universe. There is money, there are ideas. What we need is the bridges of sustainability, people that can speak the language of both sides. We need to bring ideas to people who have the resources. It is about understanding each other and sharing the priorities for people and planet. I don't think there are challenges in attracting investment because there's enough money from the people I speak with. We need to sit together with stakeholders, speak their language, understand their priorities. The Tropical Landscape Finance Facility, what was it? Initially when we started, everybody said this is impossible. Nobody has ever done this before. And what do you think you have as the person initiating this whole conversation that banks with hundreds of billions of dollars in their portfolios don't have? I said belief to start with. And we started, we got BNP Paribas, which was then Europe's largest bank, possibly they still are. Michelin, world's largest tire company, and the UN and everybody else. I was of course working pro bono to bring all these actors together. And as they all came together, they started slowly understanding each other's perspective and language. So in 3 to 6 months' time, they were all speaking the same language. So Michelin understood that they would need to employ 50,000 people to protect that forest. But we understood that Michelin needs to get money at a certain cost to be able to do that project, to put up the world's largest sustainable rubber plantation in 38,000 hectares of land with 38 million standing rubber trees. Let's think together about what we are about to achieve. And that's how it was done. Another project that we supported in India in a big way with women farmers in the state of Andhra Pradesh. They have already converted 1 million women farmers to zero synthetic chemical farming. When that was started, everybody said, how are you going to grow food without fertilizers and pesticides? That's impossible. So it is cheap. It reduces input costs by almost 80%. And you know what? They just won the Gulbenkian Prize for Humanity, €1 million prize, decided by a jury led by Angela Merkel, the former German Chancellor, as the world's most significant project for humanity. So that's what happens when poor people come together. They put their minds and hearts together. And then for people like us, who have the possibility of being a bridge between them and those with money, so it's a win-win-win for everybody. Multilateral institutions have a significant role to play. They are the best conveners. This is the week of the United Nations General Assembly. The Summit of the Future is happening right here in the city. And what happens, more than 100 presidents and prime ministers and their delegations converge on the city to be able to put their point of view across and talk to each other. What is important is when people come here and they build those partnerships and they talk to each other and the connect that happens, what do they do afterwards? And that's where the role of institutions like ours is extremely important, is that you latch on to those conversations, you keep them in touch and build on that initial contact. The other thing I want to highlight is there's this whole blaming and shaming thing going on. for the last 30 years. Who's responsible for all the emissions and who should pay whom. I mean, that's in terms of climate justice, that's a good conversation to have. But when your house is on fire, you find the fire engine. You really need to know what your priorities are. So for most countries in the world, pollution, contaminated air, toxic air that citizens breathe is an immediate priority. Drinking water that is laced with toxins and arsenic and fluorides and all kinds of things is an immediate priority. Land that is losing its fertility across the planet is an immediate priority. That's what we need to focus on. We have been too focused on something called mitigation. It's important, but not the most significant thing. What we need to focus on is adaptation. Climate change is here and now. How do we make sure that we will be there to fight this in the way it needs and survive? And then in the process do the right things. That's why I talked about regenerative development goals. As you regenerate the planet, as the women farmers of Andhra Pradesh are teaching us, that when you regenerate the planet, it heals itself. As it heals itself, your emissions are less and you start sequestering carbon. Most of the carbon you have in the atmosphere has actually escaped from the land by the wrong practices being adopted. So that's where the focus ought to be for us to succeed in this very existential battle for humanity and the other 8 million species that inhabit the planet. I am the chancellor of a university called the Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences. It's in India. It is the world's largest institution for indigenous children. We have 40,000 students on campus, all of them taught for free, accommodated for free, looked after for free. They don't have to spend a single penny for their entire education from kindergarten to post graduation, PhD and postdoc and what have you. And they all grow up to be engineers, doctors, judges, and it's been going on for a while. It's a phenomenal experiment. What I've learned there, talking to the youngsters that come from deep within the forest, is that the knowledge they bring to the table is actually conservation knowledge, is actually knowledge not laced with a toxic belief in plunder and prosper. Their knowledge system is based around preserve and prosper. The stewards of the land are actually indigenous people, and in their wisdom, there is no destroying Mother Nature. I was recently in Guyana meeting His Excellency Irfan Ali, the president of Guyana. I went around looking at the forests and talking to people, the kind of amazing work his country has done in preserving their forest wealth. And there are lessons for us to all learn. There's a lot happening in the global south, both in terms of technology, both in terms of conservation ideas and knowledge, and that's all anchored around indigenous communities. And so we need to stop behaving like, oh, they need our protection. But the fact remains, actually, they have been the stewards of the ecological wealth of the world. And if we listen to them carefully, if we work with them carefully, there is the strong likelihood of all-around prosperity, not just for those communities, but for all of us. We often say, oh, the planet needs saving. That's absolute nonsense. The planet doesn't need saving. The planet has been here for billions of years. The planet will be fine. We will be gone as a species if we don't mend our ways, and the humans will be gone. That's what will happen. So we need to be very selfish, and we need to be very protective of our future and our children's future and do the right thing. So we really need to understand the problem for what it is and the challenge for how complex it is and how urgent it is, and act now. If you look at the history of the modern world, economic development, every bit of built infrastructure on the planet has come at the expense of ecological infrastructure. Now there's something called the threshold of renewal. When you take more and more and more, then nature cannot heal itself, cannot renew itself. And that's where you get to a point that you have gone past the threshold of renewal. Nature is very kind, very generous, very giving and very forgiving. But breach that threshold and you have a serious problem. And that's where the entire problem, the unsustainable consumption and production economy that we have. And so that's what needs to change radically. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is that to look at climate action or climate change not as a problem, but as a tremendous opportunity. Look at the solar industry. What was, power was selling for 25 US dollar cents a kilowatt hour. Now it sells for 2 cents a kilowatt hour without any subsidies or anything. The third thing is that people need to stop working in silos. They need to come together around shared goals, shared objectives, and a shared purpose. When you do that, you will find the possibilities emerging. And the fourth thing is that governments can play a significant part, especially in the regulatory aspect, in terms of the policy aspect. They really need to look at how do you develop your own carbon markets? How do you look at using regulation as a pitchfork to drive change at the grassroots? Simple things like if a government were to say, well, if you are growing food without fertilizers and pesticides, I'm going to give you an incentive for that. And actually India has done it. They have something called the PM Pranam scheme. We identified with solid evidence that farmers that are taking to natural farming are actually avoiding fertilizer subsidies. And India's last year's fertilizer subsidy bill was $32 billion. So if farmers stop using fertilizers, India could actually save all of those $32 billion in maybe 10 years. And I'm so proud that we played a small part in undertaking a study that would then become the kind of evidence that is driving policy. There are numerous institutions that are doing that in very many countries. So we really need to, as non-governmental actors, we need to bring those research studies, scientific evidence to the attention of the policymakers, the policy planners, so that policy is driven by solid data and science and not just anecdotal evidence. So climate resilience for vulnerable communities is extremely important because there are 5 different things that will happen when the climate unravels at much greater speed than it is right now. One is that so we're not just going to have international challenges, refugees and all, we'll also have significant national public order challenges with people moving into urban spaces and squatting and what have you. The second thing is that as global warming accelerates, we'll have to find different kinds of means to grow our food, because the food that we have been growing, it wouldn't be possible to grow those same things. And so it'll be a dramatic transformation in terms of what we grow and what we consume. And how is the population going to cope with that? And what's the preparedness? And then why need to be prepared right now? Third is in terms of energy systems and all these ideas that are currently at play, whether it is hydrogen, whether it is solar, whether it is wind, whether it is tidal or geothermal, all kinds of energy sources can actually be harnessed in a way that improves our climate resilience. So the entire energy system, how do you accelerate that transition? And then the fourth is the economic system. We earlier talked about multilateral institutions, World Bank, IMF, International Financial Corporation, development financial institutions like the US Development Finance Corporation, the USDFC, or the German Development Bank like the KfW. Those institutions that are at the forefront of either multilateral and bilateral financing at very, very concessional rates, they're still lending to the sovereigns mostly. And we have seen that in many cases, the sovereigns are a challenge in the best of cases, because governments are agenda driven, they're politically motivated to do things that may not necessarily be what is important for the climate cause. I think it's very simple in terms of collaboration between the public and the private sector, and what they need to collaborate around is come down to the project level from the program level. Because the program level is a fuzzy level. If you had a single track thinking, that am I preserving and protecting the ecological infrastructure while I am doing whatever it is I am doing? If that is a question you ask, you will always find the right answers. And that's the theme around which all these critical ecosystems actors need to come around and discuss. A catalyst's role is to bring the stakeholders together around a common dream, a common ambition, a common purpose. And then as they start working with each other efficiently, effectively, with respect, with admiration for each other's contributions, our role is to step back. When I was with the UN, I would often say the UN's biggest success is when it can make itself redundant. If people don't need us anymore, we succeeded actually. Not by staying there and perpetuating ourselves, then we failed. If people still need us, we're doing something terribly wrong. It's a very lonely place for people that innovate or chase some idea that hasn't been tried before. So the affirmation, the acknowledgement that we see you, you're doing something amazing. I would put that Sustainability Prize at the top of the list of a lot of prizes in terms of both intent and ambition and the kind of awardees they select. Is even more important is that the acknowledgement brings visibility. And something like the Zayed Sustainability Prize brings global visibility. And let me draw a parallel with the private sector. Whenever somebody tries to invest some money into a company, there are those that do a lot of due diligence and put their money into it. And there are a lot that are waiting on the sidelines, say, oh, if you are putting in $10 million, here's $2 million from me, or here's $3 million from me, here's $5 million from me. But they're not spending on due diligence. They're believing in that other person, their rigors of their metrics and their analysis and how they came to a conclusion that this is the right investment to make. So this exactly works the same for these prizes, that it provides that vetting. So when the investors are looking at them, other supporters are looking at them, even consumers that are looking at them, so that then works in so many different ways to take that affirmation, that acknowledgement to the next level, when they become from a boutique idea to a mainstream idea. That's where awards like the Zayed Sustainability Prize play a tremendous role in bringing ideas to light, as I call it, and then giving them the shine that would then attract other ecosystem actors to come, partner, invest, and benefit from it. We have for too long focused on the global challenge without looking at the challenge within. What climate change is going to do to our populations, how it will ravage our poor and vulnerable that need the support most. So we really need to stop worrying too much about the global challenge and start focusing on the challenge within in terms of air, water, land, productivity, economic growth. That's where we need to look at through the lens of sustainability, through the lens of resilience, through the lens of adaptation, through the lens of how does it affect vulnerable populations? How do they prepare themselves better for the world that is unraveling?